Wait to inform you what will be happening in the country. Allow me now bring you into the conversation that we want to have this morning. It's very important, so wherever you are, just stay there and be a part of this conversation. Follow it at KBC Channel 1 at Safin_Ching is my personal Twitter handle, and the hashtag we are using is AfconEcoKBC. Allow me use that hashtag for today because that is actually one of the things that have taken the country by storm. But remember, we can still follow up what you're sharing with us on Twitter with regards to the conversation we are having. So right about now, I'm joined by Bishop James Murunga. Bishop is the chairman of the Leadership and Governance Commission at the Evangelical Association of Kenya. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's important that we have you because for a very long time, there has been a conversation about where the church has been in matters that are of concern to the country. And today I will put you on the spot on a lot of these issues as we go forward. At least let's have a sober conversation that is having very minimal politics, but let's have a very sober conversation that will help a Kenyan who is watching us this morning to deeply understand the issues that are of concern to the country. Allow me begin by asking you this general question, Bishop. Do you think we are headed in the right direction as a country?
I do believe we are headed in the right direction. We have issues, we have challenges, we have political activities that stirs up a lot of excitement in the country. But if we go beyond the surface, I believe that God has a plan for our nation. And I do believe that the will of God will continue to prevail in Kenya, far and above the temporary issues that seem to flare up every now and then. Because when you look at our history and our trend as a nation, there are times when we have felt like we are really cornered, but somehow God has always made a way. And as a Christian minister, I do acknowledge that God has a plan for Kenya. We have issues, but in principle, God will never let down Kenya, and we are going to have success. I believe
you know, these are the voices that we miss at times when, you know, the airwaves are so full of politics, the airwaves are so full of opinions about where the country is going. We really miss such voices of reason that could tell us, you know, which direction to go as a country. You're saying that for you, it's a message of hope, that the country is headed in the right direction. Allow me share with you the findings of research that was conducted by a firm known as InfoTrack, something that we are familiar with. This was the recent research that they said, and according to what they found out, is that at least 48% of Kenyans feel that the country is not headed in the right direction. When we talk about economically and politically. So when you look at these two angles, Bishop, and let me begin with the economic angle first. They say that issues to do with the high cost of living, you know, the hiked prices of basic commodities like milk, like maize, these are things that are making the common mwananchi feel pressed to feel that the country is not headed in the right direction. I don't know your view with regards to how we are doing when it comes to taking care of that Wanjiku, that Otieno, that Kiprop, that common mwananchi who is somewhere struggling to find a shilling at the end of the day. Do you think we are really giving them the justice that they deserve, economically speaking?
Well, reality is that we are faced and we are plagued with this giant of corruption that really hinders the effective development of this nation and in a sense, positive impact on our local communities and the Wanjikus, the local Mwananchi. Those are reality issues that need to be addressed. And thankfully, when you look at what government is trying to do, there is a movement towards addressing some of the issues. Of course, we call upon government to accelerate and be more effective and decisive in terms of tackling some of the economic challenges, the grassroots challenges. We are still, you know, beginning to enjoy and to also develop the realities of devolution. But I do believe a lot still is at stake. And based upon the fact that we have not been operating with this new constitution for such a long time, certain challenges could exist. But in my perspective as a Christian minister, there is hope and there is a future for Kenya. But again, we call upon our leaders who are in charge of this nation at different levels to accelerate their effectiveness and efficiency in delivering services and ensuring that corruption is stamped out. I do believe that there is hope and a future for Kenya.
Country.
Yes.
You've talked about challenges that the common mwananchi is facing, a very critical point there, and talked of the beast of corruption being one of them. I'd like you to bring that out more. A Kenyan who is watching you this morning and asking themselves, is anyone out there understanding the issues that I face on a regular basis? Bishop, what would you share with us this morning with regards to what you feel the government should really focus on when they're addressing the challenges that are facing the common mwananchi?
I do believe that the government needs to invite the Christian leaders, the church leaders, to have even a more strategic approach and partnership in dealing with some of the vices and the negative challenges that we have in the country. Knowing that a larger population of this nation they are Christians and they go to church. I do believe if the government, working with the different religious leaders, and particularly also in this case, the church leaders, so that there can be an engineering of the true values, even what is constituted in our constitution in terms of the ethics and the principles, so that right from each one of our families, we begin to embrace positive values, Christian values. I do believe that we can be able to see a movement towards, the positive development of this country. But again, the government cannot do it alone. And that's why the church is there, the Christian leaders are there, but unfortunately, the political voice many times outshines and is louder than every other voice of reason. And in this regard, I wish to call upon government to bring on board the Christian leaders and the religious leaders so that we can be able to have a more pragmatic approach to dealing with issues of corruption, issues of drugs among our youth, issues of economic challenges that still are, bothering the grassroots mwananchi.
All right. You've opened a chapter that has been a puzzle in the minds of Kenyans for a very long time, asking themselves where the church has been in the in the going-ons of this particular country, and we will be talking about that this particular morning. But before we get to that part of our conversation, the budget that was read just 3 weeks ago seemed to have not gone well with the so-called mwananchi. If I may take you back to the findings of the report, 58% of the respondents of this particular report said that, they were not satisfied with the budget, and it is because of what I mentioned earlier, the increased cost of living and the failure to reduce the cost of basic commodities. Let's look at it in a different perspective. Where do you think probably we are missing the point when it comes to generating revenue for running the country? Are we really sitting on the common mwananchi and pressing them to the last coin of what they have? Do you think we are failing or even missing the point when we are looking for money?
I think there are a number of challenges that need to be addressed. I come from Western Kenya, and particularly Bungoma. And when I travel around my region and look at a sector like the sugar industry, the mwananchi who had a lot of hope and expectations from what they grow in terms of the sugarcane, right now they are in a state of hopelessness. these are the issues that need to be tackled, because if we are not empowering the local mwananchi, and we know that agriculture is a backbone of our economy as a nation, but if the agricultural sector is not being addressed in a holistic manner, so that the common mwananchi at the grassroots is empowered to ensure that what they invest in their land, actually they gain profits, you know, then there is a problem in that context. And so I do believe, as a Christian leader, and I shepherd a congregation, and we connect with the wananchi on a day-to-day, and many of them are farmers, then there needs to be you know, some attention given to that area of agriculture, and ensure that these farmers are empowered.
In studio this morning, we are having a conversation that touches on the state of the nation, your nation, wherever you're watching us from. So this is something that you should listen into. And I'm having a sit down with Bishop James Murunga, the chairman of the Leadership and Governance Commission at the Evangelical Association of Kenya. Today it's a sober conversation that is free of politics. Let's talk about what is ailing our country. And so far we've talked about, you know, the economic perspective of this particular subject, and we are also talking about the political perspective of this particular subject. And earlier, before we linked up, you know, to hear what the Choka residents have to say with regards to their plight, I asked you a very pertinent question, and this is the question that many Kenyans have been asking themselves. A lot is happening in the country. Right now, it's campaigns left, right, and center. Every time we see very heavy headlines of corruption, money that has been stolen. And we also see a lot that is happening with regards to people calling each other names, our leaders that we voted for calling each other names on public platforms. The church seems to have taken a back seat on all these issues, and we don't hear much about the voice of the church when it comes to what is happening in the country. You represent the church here this morning, and I will ask you directly, Bishop, where has the church been when the country seems to be falling apart?
The church is alive and well in this nation. Right from historical days of the Christian movement, there is always what you call the remnant. Interestingly, I represent the remnant of the Christian believers in this country who are strong and who are praying and addressing issues. Interestingly, Jesus once spoke these words. He said, whatever city you enter, if they receive you, preach the gospel of the kingdom. But if they do not receive you, shake off the dust from your feet. I do believe that our leaders in this country...
Have they received you? Has Kenya received you as the church?
And that's what
Do you feel like you have a seat at the table as a church in this country?
I believe to some extent they hear, and we have been received. But to a large extent, there has not been a seeking out of a strong partnership between government and the church to reason and articulate issues.
By seeking out, you mean who in this equation? We have on one side, we have the leaders, the political leaders.
Yes.
On the other side, we have the church leaders. So who should do the seeking out? Who should reach out to who in this equation?
I do believe that government and the political leaders need to be intentional in regards to seeking out godly counsel. Jesus says, whoever seeks, he will find. And if you knock, the door will be opened. We are guided by the principles of the Word of God. We cannot superimpose ourselves in terms of governance issues. These are issues that require a corporate approach and a welcome and space. One of the things that we've been advocating for And in fact, I've had a discussion, my team of the Leadership and Governance Commission, I had a meeting with CS Eugene Wamalwa to even make request that the government considers establishing chaplaincies in all the 47 counties.
Which is a good move.
Yes, because we know that, you know, when we talk of religious leaders in this country, we are so many. And at times it might be hard for government to address or to know who to listen to and who not to listen to.
With so many doctrines,
yes,
so many beliefs.
Yes.
Yes.
But I do believe that strategies can be put in place so that all our counties, for example, and key government departments have chaplaincies, and these chaplains are not political people, but they are Christian leaders, credible leaders who can represent the interests of the church in regards to ensuring that right structures or or effective approaches are put in place in the spheres of governance.
All right. Before you continue, sorry for cutting you short, you talk about seeking an intentional seeking of religious leaders in the running of the government.
Yes.
I see these politicians in church every Sunday. They are given the best seats in church. They are given enough time to talk whatever they want to talk. There's so much politics in church today. Is that not seeking? Don't they come to you? Don't they come to your churches? Don't they knock the doors of your offices when they want to have a mass congregation that they want to talk to? And what, you know, what have you done to take advantage of this opportunity when they come on Sunday, when they come to your offices, when they come to your crusades? What have you done as a church to take advantage of that opportunity that is presented?
Well, I would be very personal and individualistic in that response, in the regard that there are some leaders out there, Christian leaders, who are doing a very commendable job. And I do believe in reflection to how the Word of God puts it, they have washed their hands and they have spoken the truth. But also we need to also understand that political leaders and governmental leaders are people in authority. And we cannot just sit in the public and castigate our governmental leaders and political leaders. And that is why I do advocate for the fact that, yes, we have a role to play as Christian leaders or church leaders, but also our political leaders need to seek out and invite and create forums of discussion. Because on a Sunday morning, I can assure you, it is possible that a majority that may go to church do not go there for the discipleship process. They go there for political reasons.
And
it happens.
Whose fault is that? I believe as a clergy, you have every power to decide who talks, who doesn't, for how long, and says what. And you can actually control these politicians when they come, because you can't stop them from coming to church. That we have to agree. But when they come, you can control how they conduct themselves in church. So when politics takes center stage in church, when people go home and they forget the sermon and they remember who called who names in church, whose fault is that? Is it the politician or the church leader?
You know, my sister, the reality is that we are living in a nation that is very democratic, and each local congregation has its own rules and constitution and bylaws that govern the operations of those individual churches. But the joy of it is that there are some churches out there that are doing a very commendable job. They will not allow a political leader to stand in the service, from the pulpit, and begin to talk politics. And there are some who have even snatched microphones from political leaders and all of that. Of course,
very few.
Yes. And that's why also we do believe that, from within the Evangelical Alliance, we believe that the self-regulation of the church bodies is critical. As we come together as evangelicals, or like the Catholics, they have their own formation, and the NCCK, I do believe that the government needs to work with these entities so that they have self-regulation and develop mechanisms of addressing the issues that we are talking about. Because some of the churches are very individualistic, and maybe a politician chooses one isolated congregation out there. Sadly, the whole church has been blackmailed or has been, looked upon negatively based on a happening of one local church or one local leader.
All right. Yeah. And we are calling on you to be a part of this conversation. And the question we are asking you this morning, the big question we are asking you this morning is what is your comment with regards to the direction the country is taking? What are your views on the direction the country is taking? That is what we want you to tell us as we continue talking about some of the issues that are of importance to us. What are your views on the direction the country is taking? That is the big question we are asking you this morning at KBC Channel 1 on Twitter, at Safin_Aching is where you can also find me personally. What are your views on the direction the country is taking? That is what we want you to tell us this morning, even as we continue talking about the issues that we have for you. And Bishop, there's always, a confusion when we're talking about the role of the church in politics, or is it the role of politics in the church? There's a thin line when you want to differentiate these two, phrases. And allow me, yesterday there was that whole conversation about the donations that are given to the church leaders that came, to the fore once again. And this is something that was between opposition leader Raila Odinga and the Deputy President William Ruto. Raila Odinga was in Elgeyo Marakwet yesterday, and he seemed to be criticizing the Deputy President on the donations he keeps giving in churches, like every Sunday on Harambees and all that. And the Deputy President was in Nairobi, and he put off what Raila Odinga said, and for him there is no limit to how much you can give. And he seemed to be saying that he is going to shoot down a bill that has been presented in Parliament that is, sort of going to control or stop donations by politicians in church. This is a very hot button when you're talking about donations in church and discussing it with the church clergy, because we all know a church has to run, and we need money to run it. And you encourage church members to give more and to give as much as possible. They say God loves a cheerful giver, so you give generously. And here there is something that is being introduced that is going to curtail too much giving, especially on the side of politicians. What's your opinion on this particular issue that is taking shape?
My opinion is that I wish to pray and appeal to government to consider giving a tithe to the churches.
But a tithe can be to billions.
Yes.
And this is what people are questioning.
A tithe of government revenue given to the main umbrella bodies of the churches and even other religious organizations. Because the reality is, a pastor in a grassroots area who has needs can easily fall victim of huge donations.
And that is where the problem is.
Okay, but now let's look at it on another, from another perspective. We as clergy, it is hard for us to distinguish between a corrupt and a non-corrupt leader. It is the role of government, and government has the mechanisms to follow up and track individual leaders and actually take them to court. And I do believe that if that happens and it is clear and someone has been taken to court and is culpable in regards to issues of corruption, I do believe as clergy we would be very cautious in how we deal with that individual leader. But if someone has not been taken to court, someone has not been charged, who am I to begin to distinguish? Because again, I'm guided by the principles of the Word of God. And the Word of God tells us that we should not judge. So I do believe government can put in the effective mechanisms and prosecute those that they believe are corrupt. And once they make a loud pronouncement in a court of law, and our court system, our judicial system, addresses the fact that this person is corrupt, honestly.
But Bishop, I respect the wisdom that you're using to answer that question. But still, if we all have to wait until this case is decided, how many cases that touch on corrupt politicians have you seen that have gone to the last stage of somebody being convicted? Or how many of these cases have you seen? Right. How long will we have to wait? And in the meantime, as we wait for this case to continue in court, they're still going to church, they're still giving these donations. So how do we balance this particular scenario? And
so in that case, the blame then is not on the church. The blame then goes back to our systems that investigate and also prosecute those who have been found in corruption. Because honestly speaking, it is a very difficult scenario that the nation would put the church into. And for me to stand there on a Sunday morning and begin to categorize and assess each one of my 100 members or 200 or 500 or 10,000 congregants and say you are corrupt or you are not corrupt, you will give and you will not give, it becomes a challenge on our part. Yes, there is a concern. And that's why I believe that if government creates an enabling environment to work with credible Christian bodies to address issues of corruption, I believe that this will not be a problem. Yes.
You've really put a lot of weight on the power that the government has in this particular equation. I still feel that the church also has a lot of power that has not been fully utilized. And you're going to be talking about that in a bit. Do you watch football though?
Yes, I do.
Did you watch the game yesterday?
I watched the game last night.
What's your comment about what went down with regards to even Harambee Stars?
Well done to Harambee Stars. We lost this game, but knowing where we've been and the challenges that have faced our Harambee Stars, but we say there's room for improvement, and we congratulate our boys for doing a good job. A few days ago, we were having a meeting in the EAK, and I made an appeal, like, let's pray for Harambee Stars. Wow. Interestingly, that night they won. Wow. Maybe last night we did not pray effectively.
So you're the guys who let us down. But remember, hashtag is AFCON Eco KBC. And today we are talking about the state of the nation. And it's something that we have decided as KBC Channel 1 to stay clear of politics this morning and invite the church and talk about what the church feels with regards to the direction the country is taking. When we began this conversation, Bishop, yours was a message of hope. You told Kenyans that, it was a hopeful message that we are not doing so bad. That is what I got for myself. We are not doing so bad. There is hope. There is the will of God with regards to the direction we are taking as a country, but still there are issues that we need to focus on. And I want you to talk about how church can harness the power that they have. In as much as you campaign and say that it's the government to willfully invite the government, it's the government to intentionally invite the church and religious leaders in their going-ons. I want you to talk about the church also. Yes. How can they harness the power, harness the potential that they have when the government fails to play their part of the game? What can the church do? When the country seems to be falling apart, what do you advise the religious leaders and even church members to do for this country? Because we all rely on you. We rely on some sort of a voice of reason that is not biased, that is not opinionated in any way. What can they be able to do?
Well, I do believe the church has a responsibility to raise up ethical leaders. And this is in context to our Great Commission, the need for us to make disciples. I do believe that one of my major appeals, even to us as clergy and to the church in Kenya, is that we need to be more focused on discipleship rather than just having a mega church which has many of these same government or public servants that attend, but then we do not create a positive influence in our spheres of professional engagement. So there is that element which I do believe that to some extent some churches have focused on you know, just, yes, the numbers rather than the quality. I do make a passionate appeal that we need to be more focused on developing quality leaders, value-based leaders, who can then be the light and salt in their respective spheres.
How do you succeed in doing that as a church leader when the politicians have successfully turned the religious leaders to be answerable to them? Through a good example, donations. If somebody is really funding your church and funding your projects and is a very big member of your church, big in quotes, how do you sit them down and even question their character? Because some people leave the church and a few minutes they're calling somebody else's names at a public rally somewhere. This is not a Christian, but how do you question them?
First of all is to negate your statement in the context of politicians successfully making us to follow their direction. That could be partly true to some extent. But like I said, there is a remnant in this nation.
There are few who are still standing firm on what
one
they
time
believe in.
when Elijah said, I'm the only one remaining, God answered and told him, I still have over 7,000 who have not bowed their knees to the idols. So I do believe there is a remnant. There is a remnant that is doing the right thing. We've talked about the need to engage with government. And like I said, and I'll borrow the story from the Bible because the authority on which I speak is on the basis of the Word of God. When Lazarus died, there were many other dead bodies in the tombs at that time. But Jesus responded to a very specific invitation. And he went and called out very specifically and he said, Lazarus, come forth. One of my friends, a preacher, he said, if Jesus would not have been very categorical, it is possible all the dead bodies in that tomb could have come alive. In that context, I wish to say that the church has a role to play. But again, the Kenyans should not expect the church to go on the streets and begin to demonstrate and to yell at leaders. But my perspective.
We had days when the church was so strong and they could do that, and church leaders would come on the forefront and speak against all the negativities that are happening in the leadership of the day.
Yes.
We don't see that much these days.
Yes.
It's conference rooms and boardroom meetings, and people feel that the church has gone silent. How do we get to understand what is happening?
We are in a new day. We are in a new day. I do not necessarily believe that the church should be involved in political activism and confronting with leaders publicly in a reckless manner. I can borrow a leaf from President Trump and the US government. At this particular time, and we know that the President Trump opened the doors of White House and brought in the church leaders. And there is prayer going on almost on a daily basis. And there is strategic responses and input from particularly the evangelical Christian leaders and the larger church fraternity. And we know that there has been positive change so far that we can testify of in a nation such as America. And that is my point of appeal in the same context that here, if we can be intentional and create space so that, again, church leaders are not necessarily, they do not superimpose themselves, because we have a mandate to make disciples. Yeah. And if there is no invitation, then I could go out there and make a lot of noise, but those who are eating will continue eating. And those who are corrupt will continue doing, their acts of corruption. So I'm appealing for a more strategic approach, a wise approach, a godly approach. In the same context, when God saw that the world was getting lost, he did not remain up there yelling at us, but instead he sent his son.
We continue with the conversation that we have been having, just looking at the state of the nation and looking at some of the things that the government had to say and tell us this morning. Bishop, I'd like to touch on the issue of jobs very quickly before we move to, other issues that you were talking about. She confirmed, the spokesperson, Kanze Dana, confirmed that so far over 800,000 jobs have been created. From where you come from, or from your assessment of what is happening in the country, have you seen the jobs? Or you're among the Kenyans who are still asking where are these jobs?
Well, I think I'm one of those Kenyans who is asking where are these jobs.
Where are these jobs?
Yeah, because when I see many, many young people preferring to ride a boda than to get a good paying job, then that shows that there is a need. With all due respect, I do believe that the government is trying to do their part. But I do believe that a lot of effort needs to be put in a sense that can create a hope and a confidence among particularly the young generation. Because if we do not become more aggressive in creating opportunities for our emerging generation, then there is a problem. There is a problem, and so I do believe that there's much to be done in that regard.
But we have to commend a job well done. They're really trying with the Big Four agenda. The other day there was a facelift for Rivertex company, and also a lot of talks on how to revive the cotton industry in the country. And going forward, if we move in this direction, if this wave continues, then we are going to, if not eliminate the problem of unemployment in the country, we are at least going to do something and have more youths embraced into the job market going forward. And just wishing, that as many people as possible would come out and support the Big Four agenda that the government has for the country. So let's go back to the conversation that we were having earlier. This is the state of the nation, and we cannot sit down and talk about the state of the nation and fail to talk about the headlines that we are seeing recently. And each and every one of them touches on not development, if you may ask me, but on succession politics, 2022 succession politics. It's all about who is going to be president. It's all about what is happening in which political party and how political parties are coming together and, coming up with plans for 2022. Is it time for us to be seeing this or talking about this? Is it time for us to be deciding who should be president, Bishop?
There are two sides of the coin in this matter.
Give me both.
One, just the fact that the democratic space, freedom of expression and freedom of engagement, and movement has created in our nation to the degree that people can be very open to make their intentions known without being antagonized. That is a plus in that context.
That is a given.
Yes.
You're allowed to say what you want to say in our country. But is it time
but
to
then
start
on the
declaring?
other side, again, guided by the principles of the Word of God, in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 7 to 8, that entire chapter talks about there's a time for everything. A good intention at the wrong time can delay the gains that we would want to have. Because if our political leaders at this time get divided along political lines and succession politics, the person who is going to suffer, again putting in the common terminology that is rocking the political space, the reality is that that same hustler is the one going to suffer.
Yeah.
So I do believe that we need to harness our intentions, to bring together our thoughts in that context as leaders, and agree to the fact that there is a time for everything. But if we go full throttle at this time in regards to politics, then the common man, the common mwananchi, the Wanjiku out there is going to suffer.
If you're to call out these benefits that we are missing out on because of the politics that is going on right now, what are these benefits that you think the common mwananchi who voted just the other day, it is just last year, 2018,
yes.
What are some of these benefits that you think they're missing out on for our leaders who are watching this morning to get to understand?
There is power in unity. I believe in mature democracies out there, when it is beyond electioneering period, the leaders come together and engage constructively to address issues of unemployment, issues of development, issues of health, and now we have the Big Four agenda. I do believe that if the brains that we see out here can be harnessed and begin to really interrogate and articulate strategic approaches of fulfilling the Big Four agenda, then we will see positive results. But if we get into an election campaign mode right now, then we won't see that positive realization of our aspirations as Kenyans. I think that would be my take in that matter.
Some people are of the opinion that, it is now that we are getting to understand the real intentions of these leaders, as opposed to what we were told during the campaigns, that we are going to do this for you, we are going to construct this, we are going to change your lives in this way. All those manifestos that were thrown left, right, and centers that were promising Kenyans a new dawn, a new day, have now been put somewhere aside, and now it's all about, I want to come back into office next time around. Do you think we have an empowered voter bloc that knows that I need to focus on A, B, C, D when I'm electing a leader, or we just go with the wave that is there? Where do you think we fall at?
Sadly, I think in Kenya, it's been a wave that is not issue-based and value-based. Our history and our trends, many times it goes back into negative ethnicity, tribalism, clanism, and all of that. My prayer is that Kenya can move forward, and I believe that that should be, one of the choruses that that the Kenyan church and even other religious groups need to stir up among the Kenyans, to begin to think far and above their ethnic mindsets or persuasions. And if we can begin to think and vote and elect leaders based on strategic issues that they wish to accomplish, and then we hold them accountable to those issues, then we will see a nation that is different.
But how do we get to that space? How do we empower the voter bloc? What are some of the things that you think we are not doing that we should? Because 2022 is just around the corner, and we'll be voting again.
Yes.
What are we missing that we should start now embracing, so that when we come to that time that I have my vote and I'm going to elect this particular leader, I'm focusing on issues like you're telling us this morning? What should we do to empower the voter bloc?
Creating avenues of income generation more and more, particularly for the young generation, where they can feel like they are living a modest life, not necessarily an excessive prosperity type of engagement. And if you prosper, that is excellent. But if we can have an empowered community economically, then they will have less and less time to run around after politicians and create political waves every now and then. And this comes by
looking for handouts.
Yes, looking for handouts. Looking for handouts. This will come when various stakeholders are able to sit together and engage, public participation. Let public participation be a reality, not just, it's like spoken and it's said that we will do that, and the public is participating. But in some areas, they may not necessarily be participating in the decisions that affect them. And that's why you find some level of hostilities begin to emerge among some people because they feel left out, they feel marginalized. I do believe that, roundtable gatherings, sitting together, like even, for example, recently we had the National Day of Prayer, and our government leaders, top leaders, they gathered around and prayed. That is positive. But my appeal is that let's devolve it. Let it go to the grassroots.
At the grassroots.
Yes, and it should not just be for a select few leaders, but let the Mwananchi come together and say, we have come to bend our knees before the Almighty God. We've come to give our hearts to God, and we can have times of reflection and dialogue and discussion on really the pertinent issues that are facing us in our communities. Then we will see a realization of our dreams.
Some people also would say that it's not intentional that, political leaders begin early campaigns, that these are just consequences of what is happening in the political sphere by the day, and they would really want to focus on development, but because they still have their own personal interests, maybe in coming back into office come the other term, then they're caught up with issues that are happening around and they have to defend their space. If you're to talk to leaders who are watching this morning, who are serving this country today, how do you balance your personal interest to stay in office and serving Kenyans who voted for you? How do you achieve that tricky, balance of trade?
It is by allowing a very focused value system to guide your leadership, where your interests are not selfish, but they become the interests of the common Mwananchi. When you begin to value the common Mwananchi and you are out there engaging and creating opportunities for that Mwananchi to make it in life, to have water, to have their basic needs met, better health services. This Mwananchi is not blind and is not ignorant. At the opportune time, when you ask them for the votes, they will give you the votes.
Because they see what you have done.
Because they see what you've done. Yes.
But, that's ideal. I don't think in our country we look at that when we are voting. We look at the popular, the person who is most popular.
Yes.
And there's a lot of propaganda going around when somebody is really trying to focus on development. There are others who are also focusing on a lot of propaganda, stopping this person from doing what they're supposed to do.
Right.
So it's a very hostile political environment, if you may ask me, for somebody to progress like that. But then, if we are to look at issues from your perspective, and if we are to sit down and now start analyzing what the government has done in the little time that they've at least been in office, I can say it's almost 2 years. Do you feel as a Kenyan first that if 5 years down the line when 2022 will be here with us and we'll be voting again, do you feel like you will have been served in the best way that this government that is currently in office was supposed to be doing?
I do believe that with less political activity and more developmental focus, 5 years from now or a few years from now, we could look back and say, indeed, we have made a milestone.
But so far, where do you rate what has been done so far?
Like I started off saying there is hope.
Okay.
I'd stand by that. There is hope. because you can see some level of indicators. Strengthening devolution and to see that opportunities are being channeled to the grassroots, that is a positive step. One addition, like I already mentioned, even at the county governments and the local communities, my appeal is that the church leaders and religious leaders need to be brought on board even more. Talk, for example, issues of bursaries. Talk, for example, issues of the old age, the old people, the old folks in our communities. This should not just be a reserve for political leaders at the grassroots to manage the affairs of the orphans and vulnerable children and all that. But the religious leaders need to be brought on board, because the Bible, and this is the head of the church, who is Jesus, he addresses us and says, you are the salt of the earth. So I do believe that Christian leaders or religious leaders, when we are brought on board, we bring a perfect balance that will moderate the issues at different levels, so that the main beneficiary of the wealth and the resource and the potential of this nation will not be one individual, but it will be all of us as Kenyans. So I do make that appeal that there needs to be more inclusivity, so that we can see, like I said earlier, our common or shared aspirations realized. Yes.
All right. Talking about inclusion, you've reminded me of something that is currently going on, something that is being conducted by the so-called Building Bridges initiative. They're going across the 47 counties, getting information and consulting on different issues. This all is, you know, coming up with something that they can present, that this is what Kenyans have to say. And this is as a result of the conversation that has been going on with regards to the change of the constitution, amending the constitution, and also something that came up after the famous handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga. When all this is happening, at least it's a good step to find out what Kenyans have to say. But when this is happening, do you feel like the church has been included? Do you feel like wananchi have a voice in all that is happening? Or it's a few leaders who will eventually come up with what they want the country to do and which direction they want the country to go?
I think the challenge we have seen and experienced before is that we can go out and take a lot of views and information, but then to translate that into an impactful agenda that really meets the aspiration of the Kenyans, that usually is the challenge. In regards to inclusivity, my prayer and hope is that there can be more inclusion. I know that the Building Bridges team, they've been going around and they've been to various counties, even in my home county of Bungoma, they've been there and they met with the religious leaders, and we shared our input, we shared our thoughts and the wisdom that God has given to us. But again, you know, that is one thing. But then how to translate that into a living reality that is devoid of the excesses of politics, then that becomes a challenge. And that's why I pray that at national as well as at county levels, there can be an intentional view in the context that Kenya will not just feed on politics from January to January. Kenya needs a balanced diet where the political voice needs to be heard, but also the voice of the religious leaders needs to be heard. But interestingly, the voice of the political of the church will not just be, you know, thrown out there, lest we just get mixed up with other voices that are not moving the country forward. And that's why I do believe that, you know, calling one another and sitting together, discussing and tackling issues is very, very critical.
But how do we get to that space when we do not have a population that is assertive enough to know that, first of all, we are the bosses. We, the voters, are the bosses. we feel like it's the politicians that carry the day. They're the ones who decide even the agenda. They're the ones who decide the issues that affect the common mwananchi and how they are going to solve them. Even during times of campaign, you'll hear people say, Baba alisema, you know, so and so said this. It's like they're following this particular person and what they have to tell them. How do we, as a voter bloc, have that power to also sit at the table and say that these are our proposals, this is what we want for ourselves? When we are consulted, we say this is what we want for ourselves, and at the end of the day have it, because we seem not to be having that power right now.
Now, coming back even like from within the evangelical church fraternity, and it's on that basis that we, about a year or two ago, we established the Leadership and Governance Commission. And one of my proposals has been not only within the Evangelical Alliance, but in all our other church networks and umbrella bodies, is to create various commissions that begin to look into very specific issues. And then when those issues are articulated, we have strategic response action plans that can guide us and moderate us, so that we are not just, you know, offering a political speech, but we are presenting strategic documents, strategic action plans and work plans that begin to move this nation forward. So there is hope. There is hope and there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I do believe that there are some steps that are being undertaken. They may seem baby steps, and it's on that basis that I still argue out that all hope is not lost for us as a nation. We are making progress, but we just need to accelerate and come to that realistic understanding that it is us who can make the decision.
Difference in this country.
Difference.
And even as you hold on to that hope, and you share that hope with the nation this morning, we're also asking you, our viewer, what are your views with regards to the direction the country is taking? That is what we are asking you this morning on your viewpoint. What are your views on the direction that the country is taking? What do you feel is the direction we are taking as a country? We want to understand that from where you sit, even as we continue sharing with our guest in studio this morning, as he unpacks the voice of the church in some of these issues, saying that it's really not the time for us to be campaigning. It's not time for us to be talking about too much politics at this particular time. That is what the bishop himself believes this morning. What are your views on the direction the country is taking is the question we are asking you this morning, and we will be sampling your views in a bit as we continue with this particular broadcast. But then again, coming back to you, Bishop, very quickly, there seems to be a lot of division that has been caused by the so-called campaigns that are going on, plus other matters as well that have happened in the government recently. And we seem to be divided on political lines. We seem to be having one camp supporting a particular candidate. Let me just be specific. There's a certain camp that is supporting Deputy President William Ruto coming back and being president in 2022. And we have another camp that is against that particular move. And there's a lot of division that is happening, even including what was caused by the allegations of assassination attempts on the Deputy President William Ruto, that has now caused a seeming, you know, sort of split in the cabinet. When we have such divisions that are caused by whatever you want to name it, it could be interest to come back to office, it could be political, it could be allegations such as what we have right now, you know, in the headlines. How do they affect the leadership of the country? How do they derail the progress of what we are trying to achieve as a country?
Yes. In a nation that has many different tribes and disparities in terms of education and resource and economic prowess and all of that, these issues become very sensitive and very delicate, because at any given time when you touch one leader, then it becomes a whole tribal issue. But like I said, all hope is not lost in the context that when you look at the trend of this nation post 2007, 2008, when we were so divided. But I believe the wisdom we saw in both our now sitting president and his deputy, they ran around this country asking for prayers. And the impossible happened. We saw them ascend to power. And suddenly, a nation that seemed so divided, reunited. We can come to 2013 and look at that, come to 2017, when we again saw the possibilities of us being divided very strongly. But then post 2017 election, we see there is the handshake. And suddenly, there is a greater level of unity.
The handshake is what it's sort of a solution and a problem at the same time.
Yes.
It's what it has brought, sort of a confusion in the equation.
Yes.
That now has sort of put the strategy that the deputy president and his team had, for 2022 at a test. And that is what has caused a lot of conversations going on. We have the Tangatangas, we have the Kitaeleweka, and we have a lot that is going on right now in the country, causing us to feel like we have a divided leadership.
Yes.
Who should we listen to? Which direction should we go? Yeah.
The reason why I have talked about the trend of the nation is that there is power in our leaders. The potential lies within them. And I know that God has graced President Uhuru Kenyatta with a lot of wisdom. And I know that he has the wisdom to bring this nation together once again. And that is my appeal as a servant of God, that our president call all parties together and let us sit and talk and even pray without ceasing. There will be peace. The peace of God will prevail in this country. Because, like I said, God's agenda for this nation, Kenya is divinely set by God to be a model nation among nations, among her peers, not only in Africa, but globally. And it's a nation of high interest globally. And so it is important that our leaders come together, starting with our head of state. He brings all the parties together, and the religious leaders. We are there for that kind of support, to offer that support if needed. And I know that it is needed. And we can be able to pray and reconcile the hearts of our leaders so that we stay together as one family, as one nation under God, and we will see great success.
All right. Very tricky assignment there for the president himself. On one side, he has his deputy with his interest. On the other side, he has that plan for the handshake and the intention of the handshake to succeed. And like you say, a lot of wisdom is needed and a lot of prayer is needed for him and even for the country, so that we maintain the peace that so far we have been enjoying as a country. And also, as we talk about the state of the nation, there has been, a very sad moment for the country as well. As we continue with this, we have, the country mourning the death of former Safaricom CEO Bob Collymore. And we even had, the State House spokesperson Kanzedena talking about what the president had to say concerning this in the morning. The latest being, let me just read for you an update that we have received today. The latest is the appointment of an interim chief executive officer at Safaricom. And this is none other than Mr. Michael Joseph, who was appointed as the new interim chief executive officer of Safaricom. This is following the death of Robert William Collymore that happened yesterday at his home. This was at around 2:30 a.m. So something that has taken the country with a lot of sadness. So many people still coming to terms with his death. But like, reports have it, he has been ailing. He has suffered leukemia, and he succumbed to that on the night of, on the morning of 1st July 2019. That was yesterday. Probably very quickly, probably your message of condolence you can share with the nation as we talk about this particular, it is a trying time for the country as well. And when we are talking about issues that are happening in our country, we cannot complete this conversation without mentioning that particular, news that we received yesterday.
My sincere condolences to the family of Bob and the entire nation at the loss of such a well-balanced leader who has done much to impact this nation positively in the area of communication and all that Safaricom has done, the innovation and all of that. We really join together in one accord to mourn the passing of a man such as Bob. But not only Bob. Just last weekend, we lost a number of people, 8 people in a road accident and that is my, it's a message of condolence to all the bereaved and who are hurting at such a time. And my prayer is that there will continually be peace in this nation, and that also our roads will, the authorities will work closely with all stakeholders to ensure that our roads are much safer, because it's becoming traumatizing for some to travel on our Kenyan roads because of the, you're not sure what's going to happen. So we speak condolence and godly comfort to all those who are affected at such a time as this. Yeah,
who are suffering at such a time as this, all those who have lost loved ones. We condole with you. One thing that I would like to share very quickly as we're about to bring News Check to a close and pave way for Tamrini is what the late Bob Collymore talked about. He talked a lot about the poor Kenyan who is suffering from cancer, and he said that it is not allowed. No Kenyan should die of cancer at such a time when there is a lot of advanced technology in the world of science, and also talking about the cost of treating cancer in our country. That is something that going forward should be looked at, because cancer is something that is costing Kenyans a lot when it comes to dealing with it and managing that particular condition that he succumbed to. So we remember him for all that he did, including even after he was diagnosed with cancer, he joined and embraced this particular other side of life and played a role in talking about it and coming out there and supporting all those who were suffering alongside with him. So we really, really send our messages of condolences, and of course we just ask for peace and calm and ask for God's comfort during this particular time of all of those people who are mourning this morning. As we bring News Check to a close, thank you so much for joining us so far. Remember, we are still following up on a lot of stories that are taking shape today, and we will be making sure that as we receive any new update, we share them with you. And the program has not come to a close. We are just paving way for Tamrini, which is the Swahili version of the program. So stay on board. Nancy Okwari is already in studio getting ready to take it from here going forward. So why don't you accord her the company and continue with her all the way as we continue to inform you on the latest where you are and in other parts of the world as well. Thank you so much. My name is Safin Achieng Oma. It's been quite a pleasure doing this for you. I'll see you again another time for this and much, much more. For now, have a lovely afternoon.